Sneakers and Cleats, the podcast.
Welcome back to the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. It is Thursday, July 11th. This is the first time you've seen our faces on this podcast in 10 days because we had a 4th of July weekend. We had a hurricane. We had a bunch of stuff going on. So, gentlemen, how are you today? Chuck
Good, Matt.
Don Harris back and better than ever.
Good to see you, Matthew.
Happy belated 4th of July.
Yep. Hopefully everyone's power is on and everyone's recovering from the hurricane that hit South Texas. Hopefully everyone's doing okay. We got a lot going on. We went radio silent there for a couple of days right in the middle of free agency, and there's a lot of stuff that's happened. Spurs made the big move to acquire Harrison Barnes. I don't know if it's big, but made the move to acquire Harrison Barnes in the 3-team trade. We'll talk about that. Barnes and CP3 officially introduced this past week. Don was there after a bad morning turned into a good afternoon for him.
Root canal.
Ugh. Yeah, not good. Yeah. Not good. But at least you got to meet Chris and Harrison that day, so that's nice. Do the Spurs have another big move in them? That's something we'll talk about today. They could. We're still very early on in this offseason. They could make another move or two. We'll see. Is Lauri Markkanen out of the question? Don't know. Probably. And then what are your expectations for this squad as we sit here right now? A lot of conversation about maybe this is a 40-win team, maybe it's a 30-win team, a play-in team. What does this team look like right now as we sit here, still 3 months away from the regular season? So we'll get into all that. But first, a very happy and solemn moment. This is our last number game, guys. This is 115. We started on 16 with Joe Montana. We end on 15. So what does 115 or 15 remind you guys of?
Right off the bat, for me, it was Bart Starr.
The Green Bay Packer fan over here.
Yes, but I see on your list, it's like maybe I was a little short-sighted.
Yeah, the first that popped into my head was Carmelo Anthony. But now when I see Patrick Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes. But right. The first that popped into my head was Carmelo Anthony.
I don't know why. Maybe it's because I am a Bronco fan and he played for the Broncos, but Tim Tebow is the first 15 that jumped into my mind. He's so synonymous with the number 15. He is the probably top 5 college football player of all time. If you really look at his statistics and what the impact he had on the game. So Tim Tebow is the first one that comes to mind for me, even though all the other players on this list are better than he was at his given sport, in professional sports, at least.
But he was iconic, I mean,
he still is.
Yeah.
He circumcises babies now.
What?
You didn't see that?
No. I don't want to see it.
No. Well, no, you didn't have to see the circumcision, but he travels to third world countries with his church and has learned how to circumcise children. Wow. He said he was very nervous for the first one.
Okay, I was thinking you've done really good research talking about Thurman Munson being 15, Dustin Pedroia being number 15, but man, we got the full Monty today, Don.
Hey,
I have seen one, my own son's, and I almost passed out.
We don't have to start talking about the circumcision, guys.
Let's not spin too far off the rails this early in the broadcast.
We have a monitor here for the first time.
It's not something you want to see.
Really throwing me off that we can see ourselves in such big and high definition pictures. This is what you guys are seeing. I'm sorry. But it's like, I'm right there. Also, I got the flying chanclas on today, so it's nice.
Yeah, we need to find one that fits you there.
I know. Well, this is one that was given to me.
Matt, I was going to say, you're either getting bigger or your clothes are getting smaller.
I am getting bigger. I need to go to the gym more. No, but this was given to us by the chanclas, and it's the only one I have. So I was like, I'll just wear it today.
Medium.
It's an XL, actually. Wow. Unfortunately, it's an XL.
I wouldn't admit that.
We can just honestly, we should restart this whole thing. Anyway, also on the list, you mentioned Thurman Munson, Dustin Pedroia, Brandon Marshall, another good Bronco / Jet / Dolphin, I think, also played for the Dolphins and the Seahawks.
Vinny Del Negro.
Vince Carter is another one, and then Carmelo Anthony, the two. Nikola Jokic, who we also haven't mentioned. Nikola Jokic, number 15. So,
how about that? 15 in Vinny's.
That's right.
Vince Ferragamo, Vince Carter, and
Vincenzo Del
Negro.
Yes.
Vincenzo Del
Joe Flacco wore 15 last
Joe
year.
Flacco, also Italian.
Or 15 last year, but with the Ravens, he was 8.
Avery Johnson wore 15 for a bit with the Spurs.
Also happening in 2015, the Patriots beat the Seahawks in the Super Bowl. That was the Malcolm Butler game. The interception on the goal line when they should have given it to Marshawn Lynch.
I got the first 3 questions to Pete Carroll after that game. as one of my career highlights. I was just happened to be at that podium. It didn't even have his name on it. He just showed up to the podium that I was standing at. I was this close to him. And my first question was, why didn't you hand the ball to Marshawn Lynch? And my second question was, yeah, but why didn't you hand the ball to Marshawn Lynch? And my third question was, yeah, I get that, but why didn't you hand the ball to Marshawn Lynch?
When did he start getting sick of those questions?
Well, you could tell they had talked about it, and he was trying to spin it, and he was trying not to throw his offensive coordinator on the bus. They had talked about they had 2 plays they were going to run, that one on second down and Marshawn on third down, but they didn't get the chance for third down.
Tom Brady was the MVP of that Super Bowl. It shouldn't have been him. It should have been Malcolm Butler for making that play. And they practiced that play actually multiple times in practice. The Patriots did, ran on air, and Malcolm Butler got beat on that play. Fair enough. He doesn't get beat in the Super Bowl. He makes the interception, and the rest is history.
One of the great little mini docs you can ever see is how detailed and prepared the Patriots were.
100%.
And even in calling or not calling a timeout, the assistant coaches were going crazy. They were in awe of Belichick waiting for Carroll to call the timeout. And then that was the only play all season long where they had that personnel package on the field. Because they had it just for that play.
And that's the only GOAT play in the Super Bowl where the GOAT, not the greatest of all time, didn't get, to me, enough of the blame. Was the play for Russell Wilson to throw an interception on that play? No. Russell Wilson got none of the blame on that play. To this day, he doesn't get any blame.
Mr. Unlimited. The Royals beat the Mets in 2015, 4-1. Salvador Perez, the MVP. Chuck, I understand you have a Salvador Perez story.
I do. It was back in the day when Big League Weekend was coming to San Antonio. So those folks that were putting on the Ryan Sanders baseball group brought in the Royals to play that year. And so we were in spring training out in Arizona, 8:00 in the morning, and Salvador Perez is holding court with the assembled media there. And the question was asked, hey, Salvador, are you looking forward to breaking camp in Arizona and then coming to San Antonio for a few days? Have you ever been to San Antonio? And he goes, well, my wife's not going, so therefore I'm looking forward to coming to San Antonio. He said it with a straight face, 8:00 in the morning, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room. It was just the most random thing of all time.
That's pretty good
To throw out. Hell of a soundbite.
And then the Warriors beat the Cavs 4-2.
Sounds like, to me, like a guy who hasn't been married very long.
Or someone who's been married a really long
or
time.
won't be.
Or someone who's been married a long time and is just looking forward to a little separation time.
You can see his wife sitting at home going, oh, that's Salvador. He's done it.
Right.
That's just Sal.
And then Andre Iguodala was the MVP of that finals. The Warriors beat the Cavs. That was the first of the Warriors finals, the first of the, 4 that they played against the Cavs in the next 4 or 5 years, something like that.
The beginning of the dynasty.
Beginning of the dynasty, of course. Speaking of the dynasty, Harrison Barnes was part of that team, and now he's a part of maybe a new dynasty down here in San Antonio. We got some winning to do, but the Spurs acquire Harrison Barnes in a 3-team trade. Basically, they helped facilitate DeMar DeRozan going to Sacramento. So they get Harrison Barnes, and they get a 2031 pick swap with Sacramento. So that's 7 years down the road. Sacramento should be a good team this year. You don't know how good they're going to be in 2031. So that could end up being a lot. But Chuck, start with you. How about what do you think of the acquisition of Harrison Barnes?
I like the acquisition of both of these guys, but you asked me about Harrison Barnes. What's wrong with having some live adults in the room, right? You've got these younger players, a young room. You got a guy that's won a championship. You got a guy that's now in his early 30s, been there, done that, consummate pro. I think he shot 57, 58% from the floor this year, something ridiculous. A pro's pro. Teach younger guys, if for no other reason, how to have a career in the NBA. What do you do? How do you go about your business, not only on the floor, but off the floor? I think he's going to be a great sounding board, as will Chris Paul be, to have in the room. I love it.
Don?
You know what I love about this trade about these moves more than anything? If at the end of the day, when you boil it down, and I asked you guys, would you trade Devontae Graham and Chetty Osman for Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes, and 2 draft picks?
3.
Or three, one's a swap. Right? So, of course, Chris Paul's going to contribute. He's going to start. Harrison Barnes is going to start. So, Devontae Graham, although was great in the locker room and I think a great guy, and when he got his chance, actually performed pretty well. But neither one of those guys had an impact on this team. I don't think it makes the Spurs contenders overnight. But as we've said, if that season ended the last day of the year and they started next season in a week, we all thought they'd be a 500 team because of the way they finished, winning 7 out of their last 12, beating Denver, who needed to win that game for playoff position, ended up costing Denver. The way Wemby's improved. We haven't even mentioned Steph Castle. So, yeah, I think it's a great move. It's a great move for us in the media. I tell you what, to have a chance to interview some grown-ups was refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Harrison Barnes, and let's just take it for what it is. He's a 30, I think he's 32. So he's still a young 30-year-old man that he's an NBA champion. He's always available. He played in 82 games last year, started 82 games last year for Sacramento. So it's important to stay healthy, and he has that availability aspect. He's a pro's pro. He shot 38% of the field, percent from three-point range, in his career, 39% last year. He's that guy that can kind of pick everyone up. And I know sometimes we get like, oh, we have to trust Brian Wright. We have to trust the Spurs front office. They've always shown us these things. But I think these moves that they're making, a lot of them are agreeable moves. Like, you can see why they're doing it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like trust us. It's see.
Well, they threw a curveball at us, right? Because I didn't think they were building for 1 or 2 years, right? They're building for the future. But they showed us you can do both. So they still have all these assets for what they want to do. And I think what they want to do, and I'm not sure of a name, I'm just going to throw this out there because I say it all the time. Devin Booker, right? It's just an example of a Team USA all-star caliber player that De'Aaron Fox, Giannis Antetokounmpo, somebody big, just like this year, Paul George. Last year, it was Kevin Durant to the Suns. This year, it was Paul George to the Sixers. Down the road, there's going to be one of those guys that gets disgruntled, wants out. You're going to have the assets to move him, to get him, and boom, there's your instant star to go next to Wemby, along with your upcoming draft picks like Steph Castle, and you're on your way to being a playoff contender. That's going to happen next year or the year after that. In the meantime, I was expecting them to make very little changes or no splash. Paul's deal being 1 year, Barnes' year being 2, they're not going to contend, but they will be better. And that will be good for Wemby and Paul in general, and Barnes in general, be good for Wemby and everybody else to show them how to be a pro.
Agree wholeheartedly. And again, I mean, I'm kind of befuddled by Spurs fans' reaction to this. It's like, did you expect them to do nothing during the offseason except draft a couple guys? And if they were 20 wins a season ago, obviously there are bigger goals down the road. I mean, what better pieces could you have than these two guys? Yeah, maybe a little longer in the tooth or a little more seasoned than, not in the prime of their career by any stretch, but these are great bridge guys to get you to those rosters that are going to look completely different 2 or 3 years down the road. And to Don's point, the contracts aren't going to kill you in the long term. So to me, they're brilliant moves. And I don't want to get too far down on the totem pole here, but have you seen that summer league team play? Help ain't coming from that squad. I can tell you that.
Well, Castle.
Except for Castle.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Hey, they beat China.
Well, there's another story there too.
All right, let's get to the introduction of Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes. So that happened on Tuesday this week in a afternoon press conference. Chris Paul not mincing words with why he came, really. So let's listen to Chris Paul first.
Man, the opportunity to play, to hoop, to compete. Obviously, this is a first-class organization, and for me, I've loved nothing more than the opportunity to play and contribute and hoop. And hoop, yeah. Man, it's going to be definitely an honor and a privilege. Obviously, I've admired Pop from afar from years, and when you're in this for a while, as he's done for a long time, there's so much respect there, not only for his basketball IQ, but just for who he is as a person, as a competitor and all of this. And so Pop has always been someone that I've spoken to before jump ball during the game or whatnot, if it's just a little conversation here or there. So I'm excited to learn from him and the coaching staff here. I come to hoop, I'm not a coach, so there's definitely things to be learned and all that stuff. But I come in obviously with a lot of knowledge from on the job training, but I also come in trying to learn from these guys. That's probably been the coolest thing about my career is that, yeah, I've went to some teams that are younger or whatnot, but I'm constantly learning from these guys. I got a chance to play with Shea in his second year in the league, and I got a chance to learn from him. I got a chance to learn from Book, Mikal Bridges, and all those guys. So I'm excited to share with these guys what I know or whatever they want to know, but I'm also excited to see what I can learn from them.
So what I take from Chris Paul and what he said was he wants to play, and that's the why he came here. He didn't come here to chase a ring. He definitely could have chased a ring somewhere else. He could have lived by his family out in California, who he says are going to stay out in California, in the LA area. He could have gone to the Lakers on a minimum contract, or he could have gone to the Clippers or done whatever he wanted to do.
Could he though?
I mean, maybe. I don't know what his contract status was and the offers and stuff like that. But I think what I took from it is he came to play. He didn't come here to coach. He came here to be on the court. You can give knowledge, you can take knowledge, but he came here to be on the court and to help this team. That's what I took from it, is that his main goal is to play and to win still.
We all want him to be a mentor to Wemby and Castle and the rest of these young guys. But if you think about it, what else would you expect for Chris Paul? He's the most competitive guy you've ever seen, right? We saw the Spurs play against him in many series, and he's chippy. And, at the end of the game, if he's down, he'll take the guy from the ball from the guy shooting a free throw.
Yeah. He's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But
that's what
if you're a Spurs fan, he's our pain in the ass. I mean, that's where I'm at with this. Yeah. The thing that I thought that resonated with me was when he looked everybody in the eye and he said, I hate to lose more than I like to win. Isn't that exactly what this young team needs? Give me more of that going forward. Where I want guys diving into the stands or diving on the floor for loose ball. This has got to mean something. You can tell that this still means something to Chris Paul. And I don't know where he's at in terms of, how his skills are diminished or any of that stuff. I don't even care at this point. I want more guys with that kind of genetic makeup. Then I'll trade that for skills at this point.
And I think it goes back to Pop, right? It goes back to the genius of Pop with this move because it's so layered. The mentoring is one thing. The Harrison Barnes showing these guys what a professional does every day to play 82 games is another thing. Not accepting and being okay with losing, that what you just talked about, is something that I think probably burned Pop to the core. I'm not saying those young guys last year got accepted losing, but if you remember the post games from Keldon and Sohan, Devin, and those guys, at some point during that 18-game losing streak, it became, well, we made a lot of progress. There was a lot of good to take out. No. There's nothing good to take out of a loss. And I think, obviously, you have to have expectations that are manageable. And I think Pop understood what those were. And so they weren't going to, slit their wrists over a loss because they were growing. But at some point, like you said, it's got to mean more. And Paul will bring that.
I think that's a really good point, too, because last year, what made me mad is listening to those press conferences. Like, I hate losing, too. But when you come to a press conference, you're like, yeah, we learned, we're doing better. We only lost by 10 today instead of only losing by 30. It's like, dude, does this not mean anything to you? Does it not mean anything that you just lost? It starts to wear on your mental psyche. Like, how am I supposed to believe in you as a fan? And I'm not saying I'm a fan, but how is a fan supposed to believe in you if you don't even believe that you should be winning these games?
Right.
Like, how does that matter?
Two guys that have, what we said this last time, over 200 playoff games between them, over 100 wins combined between them. These guys don't lose for the most part. They win more than they lose. That's what their career has said. And how can that not be a benefit to a young clubhouse?
Don, do you think Chris is going to wear the number 3? They've been very strategic with not revealing his hilarious
number. That picture that
with the basketball over his number.
Yeah, maybe that. I don't know.
Is Keldon going to give up 3? He has to give up 3, right? Like,
Like his name's CP3.
Yeah, you can't name him CP13.
You could name him CP3PO.
Is I don't know. I think that's interesting. Is he actually going to
They're
give up the
both
number?
3 on the official roster?
Yeah. Don. So I want to see if Keldon's going to give up 3. But let's hear from Harrison Barnes as well. Harrison Barnes also introduced. He was introduced right after Chris Paul was. This is what he had to say at his opening press conference.
It's funny with the new CBA, the trade kicker became more of a play than I was expecting. But I think the opportunity just to come here and to be able to, like I said, play for Pop, play with this group, I think is exciting. Just because it takes a while to build things in this league, and in order to be good, you have to have a formula to success. And I think that over the years, the Spurs have been one of the toughest teams that I've ever competed against. So they've been a first-class organization in every way. Yeah, I mean, just to do anything that's asked of me. The goal every season, is to go out there, play 82 games, give my best. The last 2 seasons, I've been able to do that. So I'm excited to be able to build with this group. I know there's a lot of talent, a lot of young talent in this group, and I definitely want to try to maximize that.
What'd you guys think of what Harrison Barnes had to say at his opening presser?
First of all, isn't that refreshing? I mean, just a mature. It reminds me of when we had Tim and Manu.
He sounded like a Spur. That was the first takeaway I had. I was like, he's been here for a day. It just sounds like an actual mature adult talking.
Pro's pro, but yeah. What a great pro he is. I got lots of Harrison Barnes stories. He came to San Antonio on the Team USA 18 and under squad that practiced here under Coach K back when Kyrie Irving and Harrison Barnes were the number 1 and number 2 players in the country as high school kids. Went to North Carolina. He was out of Ames, Iowa. High school teammates with Doug McDermott. They won 57 straight games and 2 state championships in Ames, Iowa. Him and Doug on the same team. Great guy, great family. And when you said he was a member of that championship team of the Warriors that won it all, true story, the first time alcohol ever touched his lips was in that locker room with the champagne celebration.
Really?
That's a good start to a career.
He had never had a drink in his life and doesn't drink.
At North Carolina?
Nope. Didn't drink at all. Doesn't drink.
He's stronger than I.
But I think there was a little peer pressure and then maybe accidental. Somebody shot a champagne in his mouth.
It dripped off of the goggles.
Yeah.
Right.
What do you think of Harrison Barnes and what he said at the press conference?
Yeah, I mean, again, says all the right things, but I think some of it is the benefit of how he grew up in the league, right? Grew up in a winning environment, grew up around really talented players, and now maybe his role, has evolved over the years. He's probably a little bit more of not only a player, but also a mentee while he was in Sacramento. And I think he's probably going to have to elevate that part of his repertoire as well too, because he's really going to be leaned on a lot. He and Chris Paul both.
Well, and you look at the teams that Harrison Barnes has played on, and he's played with Steph, Clay, Draymond, Steve Kerr. So he learned from that when he was young. Then he goes to play 2017 to 19 with the Mavericks. And then you go to a really young team who was a really young team in Sacramento for 5 years. You try and, develop with De'Aaron Fox. You try and see how Domantas Sabonis goes about his business. You learn from a bunch of different styles in that as well. So it's not just like, oh, we're getting 2 Golden State Warriors, 2 former Warriors onto this team. You're getting a bunch of guys, or you're getting 2 guys that have like different life experience and different on the job training, for lack of a better term.
He's a strong post player in the post, offensively and defensively. His body strength, his base. He's not going to be the defender he was as a younger player, but he's going to have Wemby behind him. So I'm not sure that doesn't matter. And then he's that knockdown 3-point guy.
He developed really well.
Really need.
Yeah, he developed really well as a 3-point shooter, especially in Sacramento when there was a bunch of driving kick from De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah.
And you have Domantas Sabonis who finds you anywhere. He's like the smaller Nikola Jokic. So let's get to Spurs making more moves. Is that it? It's only July 11th.
Still need a shooter and still need a minimum big.
So Zach Collins not doing it for you?
No, I mean, he does, but they need one more because they lost Mamu and they lost Charles Bassey, and they need another.
Still Barlow.
They lost Barlow.
Yeah.
I was just looking at the 40,000 foot view. You get the top 40 free agents and only 12 or 15 of these guys have signed so far. I mean, how
Yeah.
long have we been into free agency? This is the slowest free agent market that I remember. Certainly, I'm by no means chalking my memory up to being, what it was, but I just feel like the Spurs are doing this so patiently that they're going to get somebody by default. There are going to be some players, decent players, that are still available at the end of this. Maybe there's a free agent out there right now that wants to go here, wants to go there, that, maybe they get squeezed out of that picture, and maybe by default they're going to be able to grab. I don't think they're anywhere being done, or anywhere close to being done, I should say. So I don't know. I just think it's all working out. The patience has been a virtue, and it's paying off.
Go ahead.
I think one key to why you're not seeing them pull the trigger, I think there's a couple of deals out there that they're still waiting to see what happens. I was told if Markkanen was to sign an extension, then they might be inclined to give Utah what they're asking for in return. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's less than, I think it's like 90-10. I think they're still conceivably trying to move Keldon. And then if they don't, then they can split that $8 million mid-level into two $4 million players. And you can get pretty good veterans on that at that cost.
Does Keldon have a place on this roster right now? Like I don't really see where he fits in anymore. You have Harrison, who's going to take the small forward spot. You have Julian Champagny, who too, and that's where Keldon thrives. So I don't really see where exactly Keldon's going to play on this team, except for an energy guy off the bench.
Yeah, especially when you add Castle into that mix on the wing. And Barnes.
Not that I don't like Keldon, and
we all do.
Not that he doesn't fit on this team. It's just he, like, basketball wise,
he might have more value to get you a similar talent who plays a different position.
Correct.
Plus,
right.
and it's the contract too. If you can move the contract, then now you're talking about a lot of other variables that open up.
Right now, who would you rather on your team, Keldon Johnson or a knockdown shooter? You know what I mean? Like you need the shooter more right now than you do a Keldon Johnson.
Yeah.
What I think is it's so nice to have job security, because Brian Wright there's no threat he's going to be fired. They just lost 5 seasons in a row. There's no threat he's going to be fired. Same with Pop. It's so nice to have to be able to plan for the future. Would Brian Wright be trading for 2031 pick swaps if he knew, or if he thought he had to win this year? Absolutely not. That's just not how the Spurs operate, though. They don't cycle their head coaches in and out. They don't cycle their front office in and out. They're not the Lakers. They're not here to try and appease one player.
Win now if you want to keep a job.
Exactly. That's not how they operate. So it's so nice to see, like, oh, well, yeah, we'll take Harrison Barnes. You guys want to win now? How about a pick swap for 2031 too? How about we throw that in, because you guys could suck in 2031 and we think we're going to be pretty good in 7 years.
So I got a real good explanation from someone in the Spurs organization on the pick swaps and something called the second apron. It's real in the weeds for you.
Yeah, we don't
salary
have to get into
guys.
Salary cap stuff.
But here's the deal. By the time Wemby is really good, years 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in his career, they're going to be paying Wemby what the Celtics are paying Jason Tatum, which is $78 million a year. Wemby will probably be the first $100 million a year player, right? So when you are paying that and you pay another couple of good guys, you're going to go into that second apron of the luxury tax, which means you get penalized on draft picks. You won't either get one, or you're going to be good like they were for 20 years, where you're picking at 28, 29, 30 in the draft. These pick swaps are there so that when they can't pay anybody, a good example of KCP at Denver. Denver won, they got all these guys, but they can't pay KCP because they're paying Gordon and Joker and Murray and who's the next best guy? There's 4 of them.
Oh, Michael Porter
Jr. They're paying all those guys. So they can't pay KCP. So he leaves and goes to Orlando. So you have the pick swap that might be the number 3 pick in the draft, who's going to play on a rookie scale deal. So they're loading up for those years when they know they're going to be cap strapped in a small market.
I also thought it was interesting what we heard from on the Hoop Collective podcast. So I heard this a little bit earlier this week. I don't know if it was Tuesday or whatever it was. Brian Windhorst, Tim Bontemps, and Tim McMahon all talking on the ESPN's Hoop Collective podcast, talking about the Spurs and where they think this team is going to go. I thought that Wendy used a really, really interesting term right off the bat.
they're going to fit in and they're going to help the Spurs be competitive next year. And I think that's critical for the development of
How competitive are they going to be?
I think the Spurs could sniff around the play-in mix in the West next year. I think they could.
I said this the other day before they acquired Barnes, and I'll say it again now. I use the word semi-bluff. I think it's a semi-tank. What did they do with the 8th pick? They traded it. Like, this is a team that could have gone super young, drafted 4 and 8, played Stephon Castle, ton of minutes rookie year, played whoever you take 8, ton of minutes rookie year with Vassell and Wembanyama, taking your lumps and then going into the draft. So they didn't. They've sort of split it.
Yeah.
Cashing in for the future. And I think
keeping all their asset powder dry.
Right. So they're exactly right. So Barnes has 2 years on his contract. Chris Paul signed 1 year on his contract. And they've come out of the summer with more assets than they went into it with. They trade for 2 firsts from Minnesota, or was it a first and a swap?
First and a swap.
First and a swap from Minnesota, and to get a swap from Sacramento. They come out holding more assets and looking at Victor going, we're better, with a little wink and a smile, with maybe Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul available at the trade deadline.
So I think that what those guys said right there is interesting. The word semi-tank, or the phrase semi-tank, I think that's wrong. I don't think they're semi-tanking. I think they're building slowly, and that's what we've said all along. They're not. You can't say a team that's trying to win 40 games is tanking. That's the complete opposite. From going from 20 wins or 22 wins to 40 wins is the opposite of tanking. So I don't understand how they're saying that this team's semi-tanking just because they're acquiring future assets and that they're still trying to acquire players. That's how you build a team. I don't understand what that means.
Yeah, I think Wemby's just upset because he's the guy who pushed that narrative that Wemby wants to win now. Of course he does, but the Spurs aren't going to deviate from the plan. And Bontemps has always just had a thing for Pop. He just doesn't like him. So I don't know. I think they're off a little bit. I think the Spurs. Well, I know the Spurs were in the Paul George talks, and so was that tanking? No, they just weren't going to overpay. And once it got to a 4th year, they bowed out. But had they been able to get Paul George in for a 3-year deal at the max money that he wanted, they were willing to do that. And that wasn't going to be soft tanking. But they're not going to overextend themselves.
Yeah, I think when I hear from anybody at ESPN that the Spurs are under pressure to win now, I think what they mean is the Spurs are under pressure to win now from ESPN, from Turner, because they weren't happy that first game that they're playing on national TV, and they know, the league does, that they've got this global entity with Victor Wembanyama, and they get their butts handed to them on national TV, and they actually have to cut away from the game because it's so bad. The league needs the Spurs to be good with this guy so that they can put him on TV, but nobody's going to watch them if they're losing by 30 points a game. So, again, there's always an angle, I think, on some of this stuff, especially when you're talking about, where some of these things come from. But make no mistake about it, the league wants the Spurs to be good again for global reasons, if not for, making the NBA better.
As much as they want Bronny to be good?
Oh, my. Dude, don't even get me started on that one.
We could do a whole podcast on that, honestly.
I'm so sick of the Bronny stuff already.
Everybody is but them. So where's it coming from?
How do you sign up the number? Sorry, we'll spend 1 minute on Bronny real quick. How do you spend $7.6 million and give $4.4 million guaranteed to the 55th pick in the draft when other players in front of him, like you had to get to what was it, the 31st pick or the 30th pick to make it anywhere near that as a draft pick? Like, that is so insane.
True. Last year, there was a guy in the 50s that made the same kind of deal. I saw an article that compared him. It's not that outrageous for where he was picked. The guarantee for the 4th year is a little odd.
It's sort of outrageous.
But here's what's outrageous. He wouldn't have
gotten drafted
that
if he was
they
Bronny's
spent
son.
this much time talking about him on the talk shows, and that they're trying to convince us he can play. Like, tell me that he deserves to be there because of what LeBron's done for the league or for the Lakers, and that was a solid by the Lakers to LeBron. Great. I got no problem with that. We were watching the Spurs Summer League team play the other night, and Mark Jones of the Kings radio was doing the NBA TV broadcast. He had his daughter doing sidelines, And she was doing the sideline reporting, and I don't want to be too tough on her, but obviously she was very inexperienced, but she got that gig. Nepotism's all through the league. All the assistant coaches, kids,
Look at Joe Buck.
you can go, it's everywhere, right? So, but I get the
But Joe Buck,
I
come
know.
on,
I mean,
man.
Joe
That's
Buck's
not
good
a fair
at his
fight.
no. Joe Buck's good at his job,
Yeah.
but
but
he
he got his
got
job.
his opportunities because of his
It's
father.
everywhere, right? So it's Giannis what's his name?
Giannis
Antetokounmpo.
Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, they both got drafted by the Bucks. But don't tell me. But nobody told me they could play. They're telling me LeBron's kid can play,
can't
and I know he can't play dead in a Western. So don't tell me he can play.
Did you see after I don't know if it was his first game or his second game, Bronny's, ESPN made a graphic and it said 21 and then really small font said minutes. And then it said 4 points. And then it said 2-2, making it seem like you shot 2 for 2, but it was assists.
Yeah, 21,
rebounds.
2 and 2. Yeah.
I was like, no, that's not his stat
But
line.
again, so again, at some point, everybody's going to be able to see with their own two eyes what's going on here, and that the money is driving this. And it's summer league, so who really gives a what? But again, all you have to do is look at the Spurs roster, which, by the way, you see the wholesale changes between California and Las Vegas.
Yeah.
They saw the same things we were.
So we're going to talk more about Spurs Summer League on Monday. There was a lot to get into that we missed over the last week and a half. So we'll get more into Spurs Summer League Monday. As far as the Spurs go, I like the moves. That's all I can say.
I do too.
That's all I can say is I like the moves. They're going to be a better team, and they're not semi-tanking. I don't
Better
buy
than
that.
standing pat.
All they're doing is not letting the media and letting other people outside of the organization accelerate their timeline.
I would say they're
Perfect.
in the mix for 9-10 play-in, 45 wins at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Warriors last year were what, 46 and 40, 46 and 38, something like that, 46 and 36, something like that.
Play-in.
Yeah, and they got in the play-in. I would expect the Spurs to do
Something
that. I mean,
like that.
If it's 46, they probably miss, just because that's a pretty high bar to go from 22 to 46. But if the West recedes a little bit, gets to about 40 for the play-in.
The X factor that nobody's talking about, the improvement by Wemby. Remember, he didn't get great until about 30, 40 games in. And you look what he's doing in the summer. Oh, my goodness.
You're just impressed by that back to
Ridiculous.
Evan Fournier block. That was a goaltend.
Ridiculous.
It was a goaltend.
It was a goaltend. I'm talking about as a feat of athleticism.
Still, you're right. You're right. All right, that's all we got for today on the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. We went a little long, went all over the map, talked about circumcision, so that's nice. Any comments, actually, before we get out of here?
The red bar.
Tell me about it.
If you know, you know. Highway 30A, Grayton Beach, Florida. It is a world famous establishment that serves the best crab cakes in America and is a really cool place. You would love it. The whole place is kind of dark and it's got like red Christmas lights inside.
Oh yeah,
and it's got pictures of
that's me.
That's your motif.
Pictures all over the wall of old rock bands from the 60s, psychedelic. It's kind of it's a lot like the art here.
That's what Bob's living room.
It's a hippie hangout.
Any other questions or anything like that?
Hey, just along the lines you were talking about a number of wins. Robert Smith, who today we've had a ton of comments, not so many questions, but lots and lots of comments.
Love comments. Keep them coming.
And Robert Smith, who is always on watching us.
Hi, Robert.
Hi, Robert. Thanks for watching.
Hey, Bob.
He says,
shout out Tom Guerrero.
And Tom is watching. He
shout out Bert.
Next season, I expect 20 to 30 plus wins. So
like more than last year.
I don't know. It says 20-30 plus wins. So I think that's
I think that would be
okay.
It. So what if I was to say this? What if I was to put the over under on wins? 41 and 41 is even. So what if I was to say over under 40.5?
I would take the over under if you set it at 32, because I just saw somewhere that I think Chris Paul has a bonus kicker that kicks in if they get 32 wins. So I'm going to go with 32 as my over and under, and I'll say over.
Okay. What if I put it at 40.5? Would you say over or under right as we sit here right this second? We'll do this again as we get closer to
I would say over, but I was so scarred from last year when I picked 40 and they won 22.
I as well.
Yeah.
Share
No,
myself.
actually,
Yeah.
don't ever go back and listen to those September episodes of Sneakers and Cleats, please, because I really don't want to resurface all
So
of
I'm
the
going to say
wrong
I'm going to
predictions.
say I'm wearing black and silver glasses, and so I'm going to say under.
You're going to say under 40.5.
Maybe thinking 38. But I think they can win 45 games.
Any other comments, real quick, before we get out?
I think they're capable of it.
That's called hedging your bets, ladies and gentlemen.
Plan the parade now.
Anything else, Bob? We're good. All right. That's all we got for you on Sneakers and Cleats today. Remember to download, rate, review, subscribe.
That's why I don't gamble.
Me too.
Tell a friend, tell an enemy. I should have said this at the beginning. Sorry, Bob. We will be right back here on Monday talking more Summer League action. Until then, everyone have a good weekend.